One of the most amazing teachings, in my humble opinion, from Rabbi Nachman of Breslov is a small teaching at the end of the second volume of Likutei Maharan, where they brought the news to Rabbi Nachman. Rabbi Nosson had delivered the news. He had delivered what was going on in reality around the world at that time. And Rabbi Nachman leans back and he says as follows, and he says, there are many people who speak of the difficulty in believing the world to come. I don't have a difficulty believing in the world to come. It's not so difficult to believe that there's going to be a world of reward and eternal experience. What's most difficult, says Rabbi Nachman, is not the question of the availability of the world to come, but what's most difficult to understand is the nature or the reality that people speak of this world. Rabbi Nachman says, the many people who speak about Olam Hazeh, the many people who imply that there is a world, but all I see is suffering, all I see is difficulty, all I see is gehennim, also I see is hell. And so the question that Rabbi Nachman is asking is not what's going to be with Olam Haba. That's easy to believe in. What's more difficult to believe in, what's more difficult to experience is this world, Olam Hazeh, because all I experience is hell. Now, this is seemingly a very difficult, despair-inducing statement. Now, it's not a fully surprising statement when a person pays attention to life a little bit sometimes, but to hear from the tzaddik who assered sadness, to hear from the tzaddik who says that it's asser to give up hope on any level, and that hopelessness is forbidden, it begs a little bit of an investigation as to how could it be that in such a fundamentally shifted teaching that we encounter this reality of a denial of this world and an expression that this world is hell itself, this world is suffering. Now, what I want to try and understand is this nature of relating to hell. Because for many people, for many types of individuals, or perhaps many generations of people who lived at a certain point in history, hell was a far-off concept. The concept of Gehinom was a distant concept that was relegated to a punishment reserved for the future as a result of particular actions in this world. And it was seen as the bolstering agent of a fear of sin, a fear of retribution, a fear of refinement and clarification, and all of those things which need to take place as a consequence of whatever transgressory experience the soul goes through in this world. Now, because the emphasis was the fear of sin in the hopes of preventing sin, so to speak. So a lot of the focus seems to have been placed, and not a lot of the focus, because the literature is limited, but it's there, it's real, and there are tzaddikim who spoke like this, which needs to be understood in the proper context without denying it, God forbid, or without belittling the significance of those ideas. But so to speak, the fire and the brimstone of hell was seen as something that was meant to frighten, something that was meant to discourage, and hopefully through some sort of punitive approach to spiritual development, a person would kind of live with a sense of freedom from sin or transgression. But as the world began to grow darker, and as Gehennim stopped being such a foreign concept and started being an inner reality or an external reality of socioeconomic reality, of health reality, of political reality, of spiritually internal reality, of traumatization of all different sorts, especially after that which happened in the most recent generation that we're all still in, so it becomes very difficult to be so afraid of a hell that is to come, a hell that is reserved for the future. And a person begins to say that, the suffering here, the difficulty here, the intensity of all things here, the fear, the fire, maybe that's what's going on here. And so once we slacken a little bit, this need to see Gehennim as something that exists only in the future, we allow ourselves to begin to see our experiences through the lens of what we might refer to as Gehennim, as hell. Now, the first shift in consciousness needs to take place when we look at the Maharal. The Maharal asks a question: what is hell? What is Gehennim? What is the concept of Gehennim? If this type of punishment and punitive orientation is not going to carry its weight throughout the difficult process of history, especially in the generation of Ikvus of the Mashiach, and there's going to need to be a way of panemius of looking at these things. So let's figure out what is hell. Zok the Maharal in numerous places that hell is he'edar. It means absence. It means nothingness. As Kierkegaard describes, it's a terror of nothingness, of annihilation that takes place after all is experienced. And this he'edar, this nothingness, okay, so now we can begin to say, okay, so if hell is nothingness rather than fire and brimstone, then perhaps this nothingness, this lethargy, this boredom, this experiential, voided nature that I experience so often in day-to-day life, perhaps this is what we refer to as hell. And that allows us to begin to see this concept of hell, this concept of the difficulty, of the intensity of human experience as something that is not only relegated towards the future, but experienced in the here and now. But what's most important in this intervention of taking hell from some future orientation towards punishment and transferring it into an existential way of living my life in this moment, as Rabbi Nachman seems to be doing, is to understand that once we have brought hell right into our kind of inner experiences, and we realize that it's not some foreign thing to be afraid of, but rather it's part of me, it's part of existence. This nothingness is part of what I need to grapple with in this world. So then hell stops being something to be afraid of, and it starts becoming something that is experienced in need for transformation and elevation. If something is experienced within my experience, if it's within the purview of my access point, that's not relegated to some future point of some punishments associated with the soul in the future, if it's in me now, I have the ability to be mataken and to deal with it now. And here's where we see something incredible that happened with the Balatanya. The Balatanya, and we're going to get to the point, Be'ezus Hashem, we're going to bring on this for a few sessions, that the Balatanya on his deathbed, he says, I feel gehennim b'seich mei, I feel gehennim within my stomach, I feel gehennim within my stomach. And the Balatanya was suffering from an immense level of pain at that point, but there's an element of the Balatanya saying, I feel Gehinom in my stomach. Why do I feel Gehinom in my stomach? Because Gehinom is within me. I have the reality, I have the experience of dealing with that aspect of Gehinom and elevating it. What is Gehinom for the Balatanya? There's a story that they tell over for the Balatanya that he said that a soul of a chassid, a soul of somebody who is yearning for godliness on every level of their waking existence, as well as their unconscious existence in their own way, is a soul that was stuck in hell at some point. And in hell, there's a foreclosure, a disallowance on any experience of spiritual joy. There's a nothingness there that blocks any sense of somethingness to Kedusha. And in the foreclosure of spirituality, the soul grows thirsty, the soul craves, the soul desires, but it's unable to access that point of desire and desire satisfaction, so it craves and it craves. When that soul is finally freed from the nothingness, the he'edar of Gehennim, at that point, there's no stopping that soul. The soul is going to eat and eat and eat and eat and take another spiritual experience, another spiritual experience, more and more spirituality, because we're coming from the foreclosure on spirituality. That experience of nothingness, that experience of the voided ability to find comfort in my mind is the very motor and the engine that drives and percolates and intensifies the experience of hasagas elokus, of wanting to grab godliness. And the secret of being in a Gehennim and coming out of a Gehennim is the recognition that if I don't have godliness in my life, if I don't have ore in my life right now, then I'm not going to make it. I understand the pain of what it means to be there. And that's what the Balatanya perhaps meant when he says, I have Gehennim within my stomach, those neshamos that are from Gehennim, those neshamos that are only going to be satisfied by transforming the nothingness into a true somethingness, by being mahapich, the ayin of Gehennim, the he'edar of Gehennim, the emptiness and the voidedness, into a something de Kedusha, into a relationship with the Yesha Amiti, of the true expression of life, of chayim, of feeling saturated and full, whatever I'm doing in this moment, the opposite of nothingness. A somethingness that is independent from any circumstance or any object or any external experience of myself, but a somethingness, the kedusha, a yesha amiti of lahanchil olav ayesh, to give those who love somethingness, to give those who love something a taste of something. And this is the secret of what the tzaddikim speak about when they say that all of the sudos, the asad lavo, the suda of Lav Yasan, and the suda of Mashiach Tzidkenu, and the suda of all of the tikkunim are going to take place in the biggest space imaginable, because who else can fit everybody? And the tzaddikim all agree that the only place that's big enough to hold this light is going to be a place of Gehennim. Because Gehennim, that nothingness that we experience, that descent into the Gehennim feeling of he'edar and absence and yearning and craving, is going to become the very site for the effulgence, for the fullness and the suda of the Lav Yasan and the Gilui of all of the sodos and all of the secrets of understanding who we truly are. There's a Maisa that's told over that the day that the Baal Shem Tov was born, the fires of Gehennim were extinguished. The Malachim from Gehennim came to the Rabbeinu Shalom and they said, Rabbeinu Shalom, we have to have Gehennim. There has to be a Gehennim here. How could there not be a Gehennim? So Hashem said, Taka, right, you have a taina. So what happened? They said, listen, the air from Gan Eden has already grown stale a little bit. It's grown stale, and we have to draw a new light of Gan Eden down. So let's take the old air of Gan Eden and bring it down to Gehennim and draw down a new light of Gan Eden so that Gan Eden will now be refined. And it turns out that we see that Gehennim is nothing other than a Gan Eden that has grown old, and the experience of that nothingness where we can't feel hasagas elokus, where we can't feel comfort, and to transform that place and to say, as Rabbi Nachman says, that be'emes, it's only this place that's Gehennim because right here, right now, we're being mavar everything. This is the entire system of the lesson, that every ounce of experience in this world is a clarification of Gehennim, is moving from Gehennim and allowing the fires of Gehennim and the nothingness of Gehennim to burn itself out, extinguish itself because of the fanning of the flames. And when it extinguishes itself, what's revealed is the Gan Eden Atzmo, because Gehennim is going to be mishapech into Gan Eden. As the Sod Yesharim says, the Gemara tells us that there are three entryways into Gehennim in this world. And Zak the Sod Yesharim, the Heilige Sod Yesharim, he says, Gewalt, yesh pesach leGehennim. There's an entrance into Gehennim, and therefore there's an exit from Gehennim. And when I can find myself, Begeit Salmavis, and I can tap into that low ira, ki ata imadi, I can transform the difficulty in that Gehennim type experience, that craving and that foreclosure on finding what I want in this world, and I can transform it into a makom of Gan Eden. And at that point, the person is mahapich Gehennim into Gan Eden in the guise and the avodah of Rav Moshe Leib Sassover, who wouldn't enter in. He wouldn't go into Gan Eden because I said, I want to go to Gehennim first, because my entire life I've spent time doing the mitzvah of Pidyon Shvuyim, of redeeming those who are stuck and lost, and send me down there because I'm going to do my piece as well. And he goes down and he elevates all of the souls. Just like the Rebbe of Melech, Rebbe of Melech said, you know what, if the Rebbeinu Shalom told me that I had to be in Gehennim, I would be able to dance in Gehennim because I'm being Mekayim L'Shlichus of the Rebbeinu Shalom. And in our generation, with the last Birurim, with the fire that's burning itself out and extinguishing itself in the intensity of all things, we can encounter the process of Gehennim becoming Gan Eden Kfar, and realizing the secret of that spirituality, Lahavdil, Ruchnius, is for those who have been to Gehennim. It's for those who are not afraid of Gehennim. It's those who have been there already. And we could be Mahapich our experiences into Kalim for more Ruchnius, to more Kedusha, and Be'ezrus Hashem Bizoicha to Geula Shlema, which is the final transformation of Gehennim into Gan Eden itself.